Even Jesus couldn't rise above the grooves in the thinking pattern of his first century A.D. contemporaries. He did his best to unsell them, but they wouldn't buy. You see, Matty, we're weird mixtures of truth and error. Peter's confession is one of the most human things in this whole book, and it's man at his best. When Jesus said, "But who do you say that I am?" Extrovert Peter, of course, was the first to speak up, and he said, "Master, you are the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of the living God." Peter's confession starts in total error and ends in complete truth. This is the way people think. We think half wrong and half right. What are you going to do about it? Jesus didn't debate the error. He accepted the truth. And he told Peter, he said, "Simon," he said, "no man has told you this, but this has come to you from the Spirit of my Father that indwells you. And on this relationship of the Spirit of God with the soul of man, I will build the kingdom of heaven." In time, the error will be purged and the truth will live. Because you see, error works counter to the grain of the universe. And little by little, century by century, it gets combed out. Whereas truth, since it works with the grain of the universe, little by little and century by century, it's reinforced. And this has something to do, I think, with the Supreme Being, as well as with the Father. Because the finite grain of the universe is determined by the interaction of the Supreme Being on the one hand and the Paradise Trinity functioning on the finite level as the Trinity of Supremacy on the other. This is providence, the interaction of the Supreme Being and the Paradise Trinity. And this determines the grain of time and space. And this is even deeper than the will of God, I think, because this is fundamental. They go on to discuss in here inspired Trinity spirits, which are fascinating beings. Nobody knows much about them. Even beings of origin in the Paradise Trinity don't know much about them. And this paper offers a wonderful illustration of the difference between curiosity and damn foolishness. The perfecter of wisdom, I believe, who writes the paper on the sacred spheres of the Father, says, there are very few places forbidden to me, but one of them is Divinington, the homeworld of the thought adjusters. I'm forbidden to land there. And he said, I haven't the least desire to go there. Quite likely, all I would be able to perceive would be personalized adjusters, and I perceive them elsewhere. There's nothing for me on Divinington. But in the paper, in the section dealing with inspired Trinity spirits, the author says, I will never stop my efforts to investigate and penetrate the mystery of these beings of whose origin is so similar to my own. He's never been told not to do this. What? One of these Trinity origin beings. This is a good example of wisdom in relation to curiosity, I think.
Divine consciousness. Okay.
Yeah. The question is, what's the difference between sons of the Trinity and Trinitized sons? The sons of the Trinity are beings of origin in the Trinity, such as the Supreme Trinity origin beings. Trinitized secrets of supremacy, eternals of days, ancients of days, recents, perfections, unions, faithfuls, divine counselors, universal censors, perfecters of wisdom, inspired Trinity spirits, Havana natives, and paradise citizens. Now, Trinity teacher sons, I forgot. A Trinitized being may relate to the Trinity or not, because the word Trinitized is used in two senses in these papers. A being who is Trinitized or a being who is Trinity embraced. If two creatures Trinitize a being, this is a creature Trinitized son, and has nothing to do with the Trinity unless perhaps the Trinity embraces that being, making, let's say, a creature Trinitized son a most high assistant. Then that being who started out as the personification of the idea jointly chosen by these two trinitizing finaliters, let's say, now comes to embrace not only the concept of the two finaliters, but also the Trinity's concept as concerns that one idea, so that such a high son assistant would become a near absolute authority on that one point, but only on that one point.
Would the Trinity, the person of Trinity who engaged in that Trinitization, have an immediate, would they be an immediately part of the two that had the original concept?
No, let's say two finaliters.
Two finaliters.
Undertook to do this.
Trinitized then.
Because it's by a technique of trinitization.
It's by technique of what?
Of trinitization.
Well, what's a technique of trinitization?
A technique of trinitization is any technique whereby two beings produce another being equal to themselves and are modified as a consequence of this and can never produce another being equal to themselves. And this follows the pattern originally set by the Father and the Son, who trinitized the infinite Spirit, a being equal to themselves, and they could never produce a second infinite Spirit, only one. And ever since that time, the Father and the Son have been in a peculiar way united as the Father-Son.
Bill, does the Trinitized idea go back then to the original Father-Son?
Yes.
Idea?
Two creatures can do this. Yes, two creatures can do this. And they can only do it once. Because even deity could produce only one being equal to themselves. Now there's another type. The Trinity can embrace other beings. And these Trinity-embraced beings are referred to as Trinitized sons. Let's take Amadon. Amadon was rebellion tested, so was Van. They'll ascend to paradise in time, fuse with their adjusters, on the way, be mustered into the core of the finality, enjoy the full satisfaction of service as a finaliter for a time, and then the mandate will be issued drafting on the core of the finality for 700,000 rebellion-tested finaliters. And these 700,000 beings will be withdrawn from the core of the finality, will be embraced by the Paradise Trinity, and will emerge from that embrace as mighty messengers. They're called Trinitized sons, or technically Trinity-embraced sons. There is still another order of Trinitized sons, deity Trinitized sons. They're listed in the paper on Trinitized sons, and we know nothing about them whatsoever. We just know that there are such beings. When the Universal Father and the Eternal Son independently conceive of an identical idea, they personify that idea as a Creator Son. This is not Trinitization, because the Creator Son is not the equal of the Universal Father and the Eternal Son. And they can produce any number of these Creator Sons. But when they produced a being equal to themselves, they could never produce another one. There's only one infinite Spirit. And yet, in many ways, a Creator Son is very much like the infinite Spirit, isn't he? Of the same origin, except the infinite Spirit is an absolute portrayal of the Father-Son, whereas a Creator Son is a sub-absolute portrayal of the Father-Son. Finite and absolute, but not absolute. Not absolute in the final sense, but absolute in a partial sense, because by George, if we can penetrate the absolute level, it's a darn shooting cinch that the Michaels can too. They'll be there ahead of us. Question.
Does the infinite Spirit acting as a conjoint actor is absolute? Is he absolute in that sense as a conjoint actor?
Yes, he's infinite. He's infinite. There's no limit to what he can do. He also has a compensatory function, making up the inadequacies and deficiencies of experiential deity. In many ways, wherever the Supreme Being can't function, the infinite Spirit may be in there pitching for him. He goes in as a pinch hitter. for evolutionary deity whenever such deity cannot function. He's the versatile deity.
Bill, your answer book is the only book that's ever revealed the existence of an eternal Son. This Son that a lot of Protestant churches refer to, they think Jesus, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost.
As near as I can figure it out, the Trinity of the Christian religion is the universal Father, the Creator Son, and the Holy Spirit of the creative Spirit.
And your answer book is the only one that's
Yes.
revealed this eternal Son.
That's right. Question, Bob.
Julie and I were discussing this over the phone, and we couldn't come to a decision, so we decided to ask you. As you may know, there was a flying saucer convention here
Yes.
about a week ago at the
There's
staff.
one in Oklahoma City, too.
We were discussing whether the book says anything about contact with other planets at all. And I thought that they said no, and Julia thought...
Well, we weren't sure.
Yeah, so we thought we'd let you
They
decide.
don't say anything. However, they put such an embargo on the exchange of information between planets that it would suggest to me that they take an awfully dim view of such things.
Well, that was a feeling we had, but we
Mhm.
wondered if there was any other way, perhaps through thought adjusters, would there be
Oh, sure.
any possibility of communication?
Oh, sure, but only with a, I think
But
by,
not human to human.
no,
Do you think possibly after we're settled in life
I think all bets are off then. Because then you see, you've achieved destiny. And they take these barriers down when you achieve destiny. Here's a pattern that seems to run through the whole creative plan. They want diversification and individuation, and then later on they want to blend it. They take these 7 superuniverses, and they've got the most iron curtain imaginable between each superuniverse. They want each one to develop its own unique flavor. And if you want to go from the capital of superuniverse number 7 to either of the adjacent superuniverses, unless you're a peculiar guy like a solitary messenger, you can't do it. You've got to go into Havana and then come out again. Now, they tell us that when evolution has run its course, when all inhabited worlds have achieved experiential perfection and the Supreme Being takes over, they're going to take these barriers down. And then they're going to foster the commingling of these 7 magnificent types of culture which have arisen in each superuniverse. This reminds me very much of the story of racial evolution on a planet. They plan 7 races on a planet, and they want each one of these 7 races to achieve its level of culture. And they produce a certain antipathy as between races, which ensures that these races will draw apart. And they hope that each one will develop its culture. And when this culture has been developed to a certain point, then, through the bestowal of Adam's blood, they try to blend these races. This to me is the same pattern taking place. I suspect the same thing has to do with planets. I can't see any reason why 2 worlds settled in light and life should know all about each other. But let's suppose that we go space adventuring, and we wind up on a planet. Odds are it's either way ahead of us or way behind us. Now, if it's way ahead of us, are we entitled to all that unearned information? And if it's way behind us, are we going to be wise enough not to clobber them with a lot of unearned information?
We just couldn't communicate anyway.
No.
If they were way ahead of us, the first power to end up there would try and get all the information they
Well,
could
sure.
for their own use. And if they
Well,
were way
certainly.
behind us, it would be another Africa. They'd start
Yes, we'd try to
colonizing
colonize it.
and cutting them into pieces.
That's my point. That's my point. Question.
Well, did I hear you this afternoon say these differences in cultures arise from the fact of freedom of will in an imperfect world?
Sure.
From the imperfection.
Sure.
You think that is true rather than in the basic pattern of personality? For instance, certainly there was a pattern for the 7 races, something of a
Oh, yes.
pattern.
Sure. The life carriers designed it. Each personality is unique, but I'm thinking of the composite total of a culture, a society, a civilization.
In the imperfection.
Sure, it's human will operating imperfectly, producing irregularities from which the evil is finally abstracted. And still, the residual pattern of a de-evilized imperfection would give a peculiar flavor to the culture of a planet.
Even of the 7 super universes?
Well, in the 7 super universes, of course, you have a pattern set.
Yeah.
Each super universe is dominated by just one of the 7 master spirits. And I would compare it to the color spectrum. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Each super universe is got the same foot candles of light, but it's in a different hue. And that saturates the super universe. This determines a basic differentiation. Because each super universe is dominated by this master spirit, and each creative spirit in each local universe in that super universe takes on that same hue when they start to create personalities. Prior to the appearance of Gabriel in Nebadon, the creative spirit was like the infinite spirit. But after the creation of Gabriel, the creative spirit of Nebadon was like master spirit number 7. And she determines the super universe inheritance factor in our local universe. Now, you have 100,000 variations of inheritance in Orvantan, our super universe, because each Michael sun is different from any other Michael sun. And he sets the local universe variety of inheritance in that super universe. And then you start in with all of the other personalities, which impart a peculiar flavor to that local universe, partly by the design of the creating beings, partly by their own decision, until you wind up with critters like us, who are apt to do anything, you know? They're seeking for the stimulus of change. In Havona, you see it by the fiat of creation. Out here, it's being done by apparent chance. And yet, in the book, it instructs me, blind and unforeseen accidents do not happen in the cosmos. It's a very mysterious statement. It makes sense to me. It feels right to me, but I can't explain it. More questions? Let's clean them up as they come up, because they're valuable.
It goes back to an earlier chapter, but could you tell me the difference between the absonite and the ultimate? The absonite and God the ultimate. Absonite is in that
They're related.
paragraph. I know that they're not the same, but does one make use of the other?
The word absonite is to God the ultimate as the word finite is to God the supreme. The absonite is a stage of action on which the ultimate is eventuating. The finite level is a stage of action on which the supreme being is evolving. One refers to a level, the other refers to a person. The word, ma'am?
Would you do that again?
Yes. Go back to our firehouse, which you can still dimly see.
Yes.
To the second floor of the firehouse, I would give the name absonite. And in this sense, I would use it as synonymous with transcendental. This is the level on which the ultimate, God the ultimate, is eventuating by experiential techniques. The word ultimate also applies to the values on that level. The word ultimate also applies to the function of the Paradise Trinity on that level, the Trinity of ultimacy. The ultimate also applies to the function of the first experiential Trinity, denoted the Trinity ultimate, made up of the supreme creators, and the architects of the master universe. Those are the uses of the word ultimate. But ultimate all by itself, capitalized, would mean God the ultimate. Ultimate, uncapitalized, would refer to the level of values on that second floor. as the word supreme, capitalized or uncapitalized, would similarly refer to deity or to a level of quality on the first floor of the finite level. Finite is to supreme roughly as absonite is to ultimate. On page 3 they talk about levels of divinity. They talk about absolute perfection, relative perfection, and imperfection. Now, don't make this one go on all fours, but roughly, very roughly, I would think of the absonite level as being relatively perfect. Now, I don't think that's what this is intended to illustrate, but that would come nearer fitting this pattern than any other concept presented here. Again, when they talk about Havona, the Havona is not absolute. It is not absolute. Havona is not really finite. It is not finite. The papers say Havona is nearer the absonite than any other concept revealed to us.
That is a hint.
Yes, it's not really absonite. But then again, the Univitatia exist in a level midway between matter and spirit, but they're not Merantians.
Could you say this? Man would be finite, God would be infinite, power controllers and those power centers would be absonite.
No. The universe power directors are finite, but the force organizers are transcendental, absonite beings.
Then force organizers, man is finite, God is infinite, and power force organizers are absonite.
And the architects of the master universe are absonite.
Okay.
But a better illustration would be to say a Havona native is finite. Now you're dealing with a perfect being. Man is not only finite, he's a pretty lousy finite. He's an imperfect finite.
Subfinite.
No, he's a becoming.
On the floor side.
That's right. That's right. Or maybe we start in the basement.
But when the Father wanted to reveal himself to finite beings, he made a finite.
Yes, I think so.
For a finite God.
Yes, right. The supreme being. Check.
In other words, just because you're finite isn't a stigma.
Oh no.
Because you got everything that an absonite has, or an absolute. Well, no, I don't want to say that. You have everything that an absonite has, except.
You have absonite potential. You have the plumbing roughed in.
Yeah, but you still have no less opportunity as a finite
That's right.
to do everything an absonite can do, except you're doing it on a finite scale.
And
Rephrase, the distances between to the floor and the ceiling of each level of the firehouse are equal, and any finite can go from the floor to the ceiling as well as any absonite can go from the floor to the ceiling.
I'll buy that. The distances are not equal, but they're proportional.
All right.
There's no roof on the third floor.
I would say that the distance between the floor and ceiling on the first floor is about 2 inches. The distance between the floor and ceiling on the second floor is on the order of 1,600 miles.
But in an equation,
And there is no roof on the third floor. It's an infinite
Yeah.
distance.
but quantitatively, you
Yes.
couldn't equate it, but qualitatively, could they be equated?
Qualitatively, yes. The
Yeah.
first and second floor are comparable,
Yeah.
but all bets are off on the third floor.
Bill, I have a question. Do finite mortals go through the stage of finite, from the
Yeah.
floor to the ceiling and then from the floor to the ceiling and the absent?
Yes. And they attempt to reach the ceiling on the third floor, but there isn't any.
Uh-huh.
Which means that you never get shut in, yes.
Well, I don't understand why they have eliminated the like the finite, the mortal man, how they can be finite.
They're finite in the perfect sense of the word.
Why, Bill?
Well, why shouldn't there be finites in Havana? The pattern creatures,
There's finites in paradise.
the pattern creatures for human beings are found on the outer circuits of the Havana. Something of everything that's going to appear in the master
Well, you
universe.
know that the Bonanators were created.
Yes, right. They're finite, but they're perfect finite beings.
Bill,
Yes.
there's finites in paradise.
Ooh.
Finaliters are really finite.
Oh,
They've
yes.
had beginnings.
That's right.
They
Oh,
are
in that
time,
sense,
space
yeah.
conscious.
I don't know about the status of a
Condition.
paradise citizen. The book tells us nothing.
No, but a finaliter residing in paradise
Oh, sure.
is a finite.
I think a primary supernatum is a finite being. And they're born on paradise. They're angels, paradise angels.
But they're perfect.
Of course. Now look, let's go back to the concept of maximums. I'm quoting the book. This universe at the present time contains primary finite maximums. Now, let's analyze that. The word primary suggests there is something other than primary, namely secondaries, which are dissimilar. These beings are finite. These beings are also maximum. This means in terms of the finite level, they can't do much growing. They've had it. They're full-blown beings. They're at the finite ceiling. Are you with me? When a finaliter, let's take a finaliter, and let's forget about the 7th stage of spirit. Let's say that the 6th stage is his limit, which indeed it is, in the present universe age. He is a finite maximum. He's gone as far as he can go in status. He's not a primary finite maximum. He's a secondary finite maximum, as the book describes it. He has become the peer, the coordinate of a Havana native. Not by origin, but by achievement. When you want to compare humans and Havaners, you must compare not humans with Havaners, you must compare finaliters with Havaners. Now you're comparing two maximums.
Bill,
We're incomplete secondary finites. We're just beginning. Yes.
when we're finaliters,
Right.
where are we in relation to the floor and the ceiling?
We're getting up near the ceiling of the
Just
first
the
floor.
finite realm?
Yes.
Well, when do we start to have tonight?
Not until the next universe age, Tom.
Oh,
Seventh
I
stage
see.
finality.
Except that, Dorothy, we may be fumbling with it in the present universe
Yeah,
age.
I see.
But we're not going to smash through
Yeah.
the floor. We may be listening to the stereo on the second floor, but we're still on the first floor.
Mhm.
There's a chain link fence.
You know?
The technique of finding God on the infinite level, which we are told we will try to do,
That's right.
is therefore not evolutionary.
It's not evolutionary in the sense of involving the growth of the supreme.
No, but the ultimate.
I think it is evolutionary in the sense of being involved in the growth of the ultimate. It is superfinite evolutionary. But it's still evolutionary because it's still something which is taking place in time and with which we are participants and concerning which we can function as conscious, intelligent, cooperating partners with God. Now, no Havana native went into partnership with the Trinity in effecting his own origin. He simply was, that's all, he is. But we will not stop being partners with God in the next universe age. And in that sense, evolution is going right on. But it's going to be superfinite evolution. It's going to relate to the growth of the ultimate as finite evolution now relates to the growth of the supreme.
And the ultimate is an experiential deity.
He is, yes, just as much as is the supreme. And someday he will achieve completion of growth because he is sub-infinite. Hence that goal is unattainable in time. You know, I wonder how right we are.
Yeah.
You guys ask me questions, and I fire answers back to you. And I often think about, we may have some observers here, and I often wonder if they're chuckling. And are they chuckling ruefully? I tell you, I mean this when I say, all I can share with you is a reasonably well-unified ignorance. I've got my ignorance better unified than yours, so I'll share it with you.
You're probably saying, wait till we get this guy upstairs. Get him out.
That's right. That's right. They may be saying, talk about Peter's perversion of Jesus' gospel. Look what this guy's doing with the book. Every now and then I get a real chilly feeling about it.
You know,
Yes.
on the second floor of the firehouse, the Absenider, is he in a realm of transcendentalism?
Yes, I think so. And Bob, when you stop to consider the problems of the vastness of outer space, he's got to be there. Now, whether he personally transcends time and space or not, he's got to be able to command the services of people who do. And the phenoliters have these services. To each phenoliter company of 1,000, there's attached 1,000 gravity messengers. And they just are not baffled by immense distances because they move instantaneously. So whether or not we can do it, we've got assistants who can. We've got associates who can.
Now, do you relate eventuate to
Yes.
evolution?
To what?
To evolution?
Here, in this sense, the growth of the Supreme is by a technique of experiential evolution. The growth of the ultimate is by a technique of experiential eventuation. The growth of the deity absolute is by the growth of God the absolute is by a technique of experiential existentials. The word experiential runs through all three levels, but as you go from the first to the second level, you substitute eventuation, and then you get into experiential existentials on the third level.
And getting into imaginary numbers again, square root and minus
Yeah.
There are mysteries till we get there.
We haven't got good enough words in Bantu. I'm sure that our concepts are getting very shaky as we leave the finite level. We're playing with some awfully big things. We went out to the end of space and beyond and assumed space was catching up with us this morning. That takes a lot of nerve to speculate along those lines. And we know that we're distorting the devil out of the concept and speculating, but let's do it. The authors of these papers speculate. They say, we don't know, but we think. Julia?
Bill, would you please explain eventuation?
Yes, it's very simple. It's a super finite thing. God the Father functions in three ways below the third floor. This is his sub-infinite, sub-absolute function. He functions in a pre-personal sense. And when he functions in that way to produce something, he fragments. And what you get is an adjuster. He also functions personally. And when he functions personally, he creates, as when he collaborates in the production of a creator son. He also functions superpersonally. And when he functions superpersonally, he eventuates something. Eventuation does not involve creation, in the same sense that fragmentation is not an act of creation. When he fragments, I think of God the Father as a big newspaper. He tears off a piece of this newspaper. That's a thought adjuster, or some other father fragment like a gravity messenger. When he creates, this of course is the most comprehensible thing. Now what he does when he eventuates, I can't visualize, except I can feel the difference between fragmentation and creation. So I now can set up a third member of the series and say that eventuation is as much different from creation as creation is different from fragmentation. Now I get a little feeling up here. The architects of the master universe never were created. Neither are they creators. They're spoken of as these uncreated non-creators. They are eventuators. And what the authors of the papers have done, and they so state, they've simply said, to avoid introducing an arbitrary term, we've taken an English term and attached special meanings to it. They could just as well say, God glooped them. And then we'd have to figure out what the word gloop means. As you get near the ceiling of the first floor, you're getting up to the place where time conjoins transcended time. In just one reference here, they call the Supreme Being the immanence of the projected incomplete. I think that term was put in here to stimulate our thinking. And here's what it means to me. Something which has immanence is the opposite of something which has transcendence. It is a presence rather than an aboveness. You follow me? It's God in the universe. Emerson presented transcendentalism as a contrast to immanencism, if I can find such a word. The projected incomplete. The Supreme Being is incomplete. Someday he will enjoy an immanence in the grand universe. I think in certain ways he can project this immanence. And let's say, shine a colored slide on the ceiling of the first floor, where time conjoins transcendent time. And that juncture there might have reflective properties, just like a literal ceiling. And then he can reflect back onto the first floor level a part of the image of what he is to be in the future. We're monkeying with our sequence concept here, and it's dangerous. At any rate, he isn't here. And if he isn't here, how in the devil do you explain the presence of the unqualified supervisors of the Supreme, who represent him in universes settled in light and light? He shouldn't be able to do this until he's a completed being. They're previews, yes. This is a sneak preview of the next universe age. In a certain sense, I think the ultimate is functional. We know he's in Havona, along with the Supreme Being. We discover that in paper 13, or 14. The second experiential trinity is functional in a limited sense because the incomplete ultimate is functional in a limited sense. The incomplete supreme is definitely functional. So you have a partial function of the first experiential trinity. If you have a partial function of the first experiential trinity, do you also have a partial function, a lesser function, a more attenuated function of the second experiential Trinity? And if you do, then in some sense the unrevealed consummator of universe destiny is now functional. I don't know. And then again, remember what they tell us in universe levels of reality. This whole story is told from the time perspective. The eternity perspective, the paradise viewpoint, would look at this entirely differently. Because the thing which separates the Supreme Being from full function is time. And on paradise, time is not real.
It's all done in paradise.
And too much thinking in this direction is going to leave you dizzy. I would say the simplest proof I can offer is the unimpeachable evidence that human beings can make jackasses out of themselves from time to time and at various times.
No, but I mean that seriously because Betty's been having that difficulty. And we have tried to give her the steps that prove conclusively we have free will. There is a sequence that proves that we
I don't think you prove that. I think you feel it. You reason it out.
Well, as I said, we do have free will, but only within the limits of our leash.
But where God is concerned, it's a very long leash. In fact, there's no limit.
It's this I will accept in that.
No, practically speaking, in everyday life, Betty, I look at free will this way. I think, in many ways, I'm like a railroad train traveling down a track. And much of the way, I don't have a great deal in the way of choice to make. I'm on the main line, I hope. But now and then I pass over switches. And by gosh, every time I go over a switch, I can throw that switch either way. I hit a divergence in the path, and there I can make a choice. I can choose either fork. I can even, if I want to operate determinedly, I can build a road. I can maybe even make a fork within limits, but mostly we don't do that. I think mostly we make choices as between alternative situations which come to us in more or less the natural course of events. But these are true choices. You can say, fine, you'll choose in accordance with your past background. I will cordially agree with you. But I will insist that you might not. I will insist that you are not necessarily going to do that. The statistical probability is that you will. There are many worlds that were made to be inhabited by creatures who could know God, receive his affection, and love him in return. This is not an idle experiment. This is a purposeful adventure. And in paragraph 3, they point out what the goal of these creatures is. And then they confront us with the major theme of this book, God's challenge to mortal man. Be you perfect, even as I am perfect. And they point out that we're not left in ignorance as to this challenge. The message is brought home to us. And then in the next paragraph, they point out that this should be real exciting to us. This should give us goose pimples like golf balls. This should get us real jumping. This is it for us. And then they qualify it. They say, now what are we talking about? Does this mean you're going to be equal to God? No. But within your limitations, you can become godlike. You can become as a creature perfect within the limitations of a creature, just as he is perfect, without limitation. And then they repeat again, this is what we mean. This is what God means when he says, when he challenges you, come on, try to be perfect like I am perfect. Mind is your ship. The adjuster is your pilot. The human will is captain. The master of the mortal vessel should have the wisdom to trust the divine pilot, to guide the ascending souls into the Marantia harbors of eternal survival. Only by selfishness, slothfulness, and sinfulness can the will of man reject the guidance of such a loving pilot and eventually wreck the mortal career upon the evil shoals of rejected mercy and on the rocks of embraced sin. With your consent, the faithful pilot will safely carry you across the barriers of time and the handicaps of space to the very source of the divine mind and on beyond, even to the paradise Father of adjusters.